Okay, I want you to imagine for a second that you are a time-traveling detective and you've just been handed the ultimate archaeological mystery. How does a completely forgotten teenager, a kid whose own people actively tried to erase him from history, end up becoming the absolute most famous king in human history? It's this massive paradox, and it's captivated the world for well over a century now.
So, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're setting the stage for just an incredible journey back in time. We are literally unearthing the secrets of ancient Egypt and walking right through the plastered doors of King Tutankhamun's tomb. I'm so excited to guide you through this, so let's roll up our sleeves and start digging. Here is our excavation plan for today. 1. The 3,000-year empire. 2. Daily life along the Nile. 3. Preparing for the afterlife. 4. The short-lived boy king. And finally, 5. Howard Carter's great discovery.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the 3,000-year empire, a civilization built to last.
To really understand our boy king, we first need to pull back and look at the massive, sweeping scale of the world he was born into. Ancient Egypt is one of the longest-lasting civilizations in the world. I mean, it stretches over 3,000 years, so historians usually break it down into major periods to kind of make sense of it all. You've got the Old Kingdom, starting around 2575 BC, which is known as the Age of the Pyramids. That's when those massive structures covered in glowing white limestone were built. Then the Middle Kingdom kicks off around 1938 BC. This was an era famous for producing some of Egypt's greatest art, and interestingly, the first stories written just for entertainment. And finally, the New Kingdom, starting around 1540 BC. This was ancient Egypt's most prosperous, powerful period. It featured heavy hitters like the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, Ramses II, and of course, King Tutankhamun. And just to put that staggering timeline into perspective for a second, get this. Cleopatra, Egypt's last pharaoh, actually lived closer to our modern time today than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids at Giza. Just let that sink in. The civilization was already considered ancient history to the later ancient Egyptians themselves. It's wild. Moving on to Section 2, Daily Life Along the Nile, the people behind the pyramids. We so often get caught up focusing on the untouchable, godlike pharaohs, right? But let's shift our focus down to the everyday commoners who actually built and sustained this whole society. The ancient Egyptians called their homeland Kemet, which means black land, and this referred directly to the dark, incredibly fertile soil that was left behind every single year when the Nile River flooded. The Nile was the absolute lifeblood of Egypt. Without it, farmers just couldn't have grown the wheat, the barley, the flax, and the grapes that fed and clothed the empire. And most people back then were farmers, living in these mud brick houses right along the riverbanks, relying entirely on this yearly cycle. What's really fascinating about their daily life is how relatable and honestly surprisingly modern it actually was. For instance, women in ancient Egypt had significantly more freedom than in a lot of other ancient cultures. They had equal rights to own homes and businesses, and they could even serve as doctors. Also, they absolutely adored their pets, especially cats, which they endearingly called mew, which, you have to admit, sounds exactly like a cat's meow. For fun, they swam in the Nile and played board games. Oh, and here is a highly amusing culinary fact from our sources. Bakers sometimes kneaded bread dough with their bare feet. So, a little extra ancient flavor for the bread, I guess.
Okay, Section 3, preparing for the afterlife, packing for eternity.
Because the Egyptians enjoyed their rich daily life so much, they truly believed the afterlife would be almost exactly the same. Just, minus the sadness, sickness, or pesky mosquitoes. But to get to this perfect eternal life, they had to pack for it. So I want to pose this question to you. What actually goes inside a pharaoh's tomb? Keep this active in your mind because it's a crucial narrative clue for the absolute treasure trove we're going to stumble into in 1922. Basically, to survive in the afterlife, a ruler needed to literally take their things with them. And they packed an incredibly bizarre mix of the majestic and the super mundane. We're talking everyday items like clothing, food, beds, and even entire chariots. Yes, they even packed underwear for eternity. You gotta be prepared, right? They also packed magical items called shabtis. These were small human statues placed in the tomb that people believed would magically come alive to serve the ruler in the underworld. And finally, to safely navigate past the gods, they brought the Book of the Dead, which were these papyrus scrolls filled with spells and instructions.
That brings us to Section 4, the short-lived boy king, the erasure of Tutankhamun. So, we're zooming into a very specific, highly turbulent era now. A young 9-year-old boy is about to inherit a country facing massive political and religious whiplash. The crucial point here is understanding the sheer chaos he walked into. Tut's father, Akhenaten, had completely upended thousands of years of established tradition. He forced the entire country to abandon their 2,000 different gods and worship only one, Aten, the sun god. Well, the priests and the common people deeply dislike this. So when 9-year-old Tutankhamun takes the throne, he's got a huge job to do. He reverses the controversial policies, repairs the old temples, pays for new statues, and essentially restores the traditional worship of the old gods. He even changed his own birth name to distance himself from his father's sun god and honor the old ways.
But despite all his efforts to fix the country, Tut's reign ended in tragedy. He died unexpectedly right around age 19. And because of this sudden death, his burial was super rushed. He was put in an unusually small, unfinished tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The paint on the walls was literally still wet when they closed it up, which is why archaeologists later found mold spots growing on it. But the real tragedy? That came after his death. The pharaohs who succeeded Tut wanted his father's controversial religious changes permanently forgotten, so they actively erased Tut too. They destroyed his statues and struck his name from the historical list of kings. He was so entirely forgotten that just 150 years later, workers building a tomb for Ramses VI built almost directly on top of Tut's tomb. They had absolutely no idea it was even down there.
And that sets us up perfectly for Section 5, Howard Carter's Great Discovery, Unearthing the Forgotten. Let's fast forward a few millennia to the 1920s. British archaeologist Howard Carter and his wealthy funder, Lord Carnarvon, are just stubbornly digging through the sand down to the bedrock in the Valley of the Kings. For 3,000 years, this royal resting place sat in total, undisturbed darkness. Carter and his team had searched for years, and Lord Carnarvon was actually ready to just give up completely. But Carter asked for just a few more months. And in November 1922, they finally uncovered steps leading down to a plaster doorway stamped with a single, incredible name, Tutankhamun. So Carter makes this tiny hole in that ancient sealed plastered doorway, and he holds up a candle to look inside. When someone asked him if he could see anything, he later wrote this legendary quote: "Details of the room emerge slowly from the mist, strange animals, statues, and gold, everywhere, the glint of gold." It genuinely gives you chills to think about, doesn't it? That is the exact moment an intentionally erased history was brought back into the light of day.
Carter suspensefully explored the tomb, going chamber by chamber. First, they spent months in the antechamber. And interestingly, it was a mess. Ancient looters had actually broken in twice, but were stopped by guards, who hastily just tossed the 600 remaining items back inside. Next, they opened the burial chamber. This room was almost entirely filled by a massive golden shrine, which nested down into a stone sarcophagus. 3 golden coffins, and finally, the untouched mummy of King Tutankhamun himself. Lastly, they entered the treasury. This room was beautifully guarded by a statue of Anubis, the god of mummification, and it held shrines containing Tut's removed organs. It just really showed how perfectly preserved these Egyptian burial practices truly were. Over 5,000! That is the staggering number of magnificent objects Carter and his team meticulously pulled from this single small rush tomb over a span of nearly 10 years. We're talking everything from golden beds shaped like animals to chariots to, yes, that eternal underwear we talked about earlier. The whole thing became a global media sensation that just completely captivated the world. But, with a massive global sensation comes rumors. People everywhere were asking, was there a pharaoh's curse? After all, just 6 months after opening the tomb, Carter's funder, Lord Carnarvon, died from an infected mosquito bite. A friend of Carter's was gifted an object from the tomb, and his house mysteriously burned down, was rebuilt, and then flooded. I mean, it sounds exactly like the plot of a movie. But, just to balance the facts out neutrally here, Howard Carter, the guy who actually broke the seal, opened the chambers, and spent 10 years inside handling the artifacts, he lived for another 17 perfectly healthy years, so the curse was likely just a bit of a media frenzy. So, I want to leave you with this thought-provoking question that we opened with. How did a short-lived, forgotten king, purposefully erased by his own people, become the most famous ruler in history? Well, it's the supreme irony of King Tut's eternal legacy. Because he was so completely forgotten and his tomb was built over and buried, it was entirely spared from later grave robbers.
His erasure is literally the exact reason his tomb remained perfectly intact, preserving an unparalleled time capsule of ancient Egyptian life for us to marvel at today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and always keep digging for the truth.